They came to burn our world, but ended up serving us soup. Strange how the galaxy works. My name is Marcus Chen, and I was there when humanity's first contact turned into the galaxy's bloodiest feast. Not the kind of feast you're thinking of. No, this was different. This was the day we learned that even gods can starve. Picture this. You're standing in a trench carved from molten glass, watching ships the size of mountains descend through clouds of poison. The air tastes like copper and ozone, thick enough to choke on. Your rifle, if you can even call it that, fires rounds that barely scratch paint off their hulls. And across the battlefield, walking toward you through the smoke, are beings that make your nightmares look like children's drawings. The Vayrans. Pale blue skin like frozen corpses, but alive. So alive you can see their veins pulsing with bioluminescent light that traces patterns across their flesh like living tattoos. Arms longer than any humans, joints that bend in ways that shouldn't be possible, ending in hands with too many fingers, each one tipped with claws that can cut through steel like paper. Their eyes. God, their eyes. 6 of them arranged in perfect symmetry across faces that follow no earthly geometry, glowing like dying stars with an intelligence that's older than our entire civilization. When they moved, it was like watching water flow uphill. Impossible, graceful, wrong. Their bio-armor rippled with each step, not worn but grown, living tissue that pulsed with the rhythm of alien hearts. When they breathed, you could see the atmosphere around them shimmer with toxins that would kill a human in seconds. They came from a constellation we'd never bothered to name, riding ships that weren't built but birthed. Brought weapons that bent physics and a pride so vast it could swallow solar systems. For 3 months, they carved through our outer colonies like a hot knife through butter, leaving nothing but glass and screaming. Their bioships moved through space like vast sea creatures through cosmic oceans, hulls that pulsed with bioluminescent displays, weapon ports that opened like mouths lined with crystalline teeth. When they fired, it wasn't energy or projectiles. It was something alive, something that screamed as it tore through our hulls and found our crew. I watched from the observation deck of Lunar Station as they took Mars. 3 hours. That's all it took them to reduce humanity's second home to a ball of molten rock. Their spore weapons turned the atmosphere into acid that ate through our dome cities like tissue paper. The screams reached us even through the vacuum of space, transmitted through our own communication arrays in a final, futile plea for help that would never come. But that's not the strange part. The strange part came later, when the dying started. Not us, them. I should have died in the first wave when they hit Earth's orbital defenses. Should have been vaporized when their biocruiser punched through the defensive grid and landed directly on top of Forward Base Alpha, where I was stationed as a communications specialist. Should have been just another casualty report in humanity's last desperate transmission to the outer colonies. Instead, I lived to see something impossible, the galaxy's apex predators collapsing from starvation in the middle of their victory feast. Act 1. The War Front. I remember the exact moment everything changed. It was 03:47 hours, ship time, aboard the UES Defiance, humanity's last operational dreadnought. I was pressed against a viewport in the communications bay, watching our home fleet get shredded by Veyran bioships that moved like living things through the void. The Defiance was humanity's pride, 2 kilometers of steel and ceramic composites, bristling with enough firepower to crack a continent. Her crew of 8,000 represented the best of human military engineering, tactical doctrine, and sheer bloody-minded determination to survive. We'd held the line against the Veyran advance for 6 weeks, longer than any other human force had managed, but we were losing. Badly. Through the reinforced transparisteel, I watched the bioship Writhing Hunger tear through our escort fleet like a predator through a school of fish. The Veyron vessel was beautiful in the worst possible way, a living ship 3 kilometers long, its hull covered in bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with alien thought processes. Weapon pods sprouted from its sides like organic growths, each one housing spore launchers that could dissolve a frigate in seconds. Their vessels weren't built, they were grown. Massive organisms with hulls that pulsed like beating hearts, weapon ports that opened like mouths lined with crystalline teeth. When they fired, it wasn't lasers or missiles. It was something alive, something that screamed as it tore through our hulls and found our crew. The UES Yorktown, our heavy cruiser, tried to flank the bioship from starboard. Her captain, Sarah Martinez, a woman who'd fought pirates in the belt for 20 years, knew every trick in the tactical manual. She fired a full spread of quantum torpedoes, weapons that could punch through a kilometer of solid rock. The bioship absorbed them. Just absorbed them. The explosions disappeared into its hull like drops of water into a sponge, feeding whatever alien metabolism kept the thing alive. Then it turned toward the Yorktown with predatory grace and opened its mouth. That's the only way I can describe it. The front section of the bioship split open like a flower made of bone and muscle, revealing rows of crystalline teeth that sparked with bioelectrical energy. The spore stream that emerged looked like golden mist, beautiful and deadly, eating through the Yorktown's hull in seconds. I watched 800 good people die as their ship folded in on itself, its structure dissolved by weapons that treated matter like a suggestion rather than a law. "Chen!" Sergeant Rodriguez grabbed my shoulder, pulling me away from the viewport. Blood streaked his face from a head wound he'd picked up during the last boarding action. "Admiral wants all communications personnel on Deck 7. We're going down fighting." Going down fighting. That was humanity's specialty, wasn't it? The galaxy's stubborn children, too stupid to know when we were beaten, too proud to surrender even when surrender might save lives. I followed Rodriguez through corridors that shook with each impact, past wounded soldiers who'd never see Earth again, past blast doors sealing off sections where the hull had been breached. The ship was dying around us, its superstructure groaning under stress that would have killed a lesser vessel hours ago. But we kept moving because that's what humans do. We endure. The corridors of the Defiance told the story of our war. Scorch marks from Veyron spore weapons that had eaten through bulkheads. Emergency patches covering hull breaches where their biofighters had tried to burrow inside like parasites. Medical stations overflowing with casualties whose wounds glowed with alien toxins that our doctors couldn't treat. Deck 7 was chaos. 300 Marines in powered armor, checking weapons that would be useless against Veyron biotech, saying prayers to gods who'd apparently abandoned this corner of space. Through the deck's massive viewport, I could see Veyron dropships descending toward Earth's surface like metal rain. The dropships were smaller versions of their cruisers, living vessels that moved with muscular contractions, their hulls rippling with each atmospheric entry. They landed like meteors, punching through our orbital defenses and burying themselves in the surface like seeds looking for fertile ground. "Listen up!" Admiral Reeves stood at the center of the deck, her uniform scorched, her left arm hanging useless at her side. She'd lost the arm in a boarding action 3 days ago when Veyron bio-warriors had tried to take the bridge. The medics had sealed the wound with synth flesh, but she refused painkillers, said she needed to feel the cost of command. Her remaining hand gripped a data tablet showing tactical displays that painted Earth in shades of red and orange, zones of Veyron occupation spreading like infection across the continents. Intelligence reports the Veyrons are landing ground forces in major population centers. They want something down there, something they can't get by orbital bombardment. She paused, looking at each of us with eyes that had seen too much death. Preliminary analysis suggests they're not trying to exterminate the civilian population. They're harvesting. Harvesting. The word sent ice through my veins. We'd heard rumors from the outer colonies before communications were cut. stories of Veyran bioprocessors that could break down organic matter and reconstruct it into their own biological systems. Entire cities dissolved and reformed into alien architectures that pulsed with borrowed life. "We're going to make sure they don't get it," Reeves continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd made peace with impossible odds. "The Defiance is going to ram the largest bioship in their formation. Our sacrifice will give the evacuation transports time to reach the outer system." A suicide mission. I should have been terrified, but instead I felt something like relief. At least it would be quick. At least we'd die as humans instead of being dissolved and reconstructed into alien biomatter. That's when the first Veyran bioship breached our hull. The sound was like tearing metal mixed with a dying animal's scream. Emergency lights bathed everything in hellish red as atmosphere rushed out through a hole that pulsed like a wound. The breach wasn't caused by weapons. It was caused by the bioship itself, parts of its hull extending into our ship like fingers probing a wound. And through that wound, they came, Veyrans in their living armor, biosuits that moved with their bodies like second skin. Up close, they were even more terrifying than our intelligence reports had suggested. 7 feet tall, maybe 8, with that pale blue skin that seemed to glow from within. The constellation tattoos across their arms and torsos pulsed with their own light, 7 points arranged in perfect geometry, marking them as warriors of some kind. Their bio-armor flowed around their bodies like liquid metal, organic circuits that processed information and routed power through biological conduits. When they moved, you could hear their armor breathing, adapting to environmental conditions in real time. Their weapons weren't held, they were attached, growing from their arms like metallic tumors. Bio-launchers that fired spore clusters, energy projectors that channeled their own life force into destructive beams, melee weapons that extended from their forearms like living blades. When they fired, spores of light erupted from organic barrels, eating through our armor like acid, the air filled with golden mist that burned human lungs and dissolved human flesh with surgical precision. I raised my rifle and squeezed the trigger, watching bullets bounce off their biosuits like rain. One of them turned toward me, all 6 eyes focusing with predatory intensity. Its weapon arm pulsed with hungry light as organic mechanisms prepared to fire. I should have died right there, would have, if not for what happened next. The Veyran's weapon misfired. Not jammed, misfired. The bio-light that should have turned me into soup instead flickered and died. The creature's eyes widened in what I swear was confusion before it collapsed, its biosuit convulsing as if it were having a seizure. Around the deck, other Veyrans were falling, not from our weapons, but from something else, something wrong with them. Their bio-armor was retracting, exposing pale blue flesh that looked diminished, like they were shrinking from the inside out. Rodriguez appeared beside me, his face pale behind his helmet's visor. "Chen, you seeing this?" I was seeing it, but I wasn't understanding it. The most advanced alien species humanity had ever encountered, beings who'd conquered half the galaxy with their biotechnology, were dropping like flies in the middle of their own boarding action. That's when I noticed the smell. Sweet, cloying, wrong, like flowers left too long in the sun or fruit rotting in the heat. But underneath that sweetness was something else, the sharp, clinical scent of biological systems shutting down. The Veyrans weren't just dying, they were starving. Their biotechnology, which had seemed invincible just moments before, was consuming itself. Weapons that grew from their arms were withering like plants without water. Armor that had flowed like liquid was hardening into brittle shells that cracked with each movement. One of the fallen Veyrans, a warrior whose constellation tattoos had gone completely dark, managed to speak before losing consciousness. The translation software in my helmet passed his words. The stars, they're moving. The constellation breaks. Then he died, his body simply stopping. Not like a machine powering down, but like a song ending mid-note. His bioarmor crumbled to dust, leaving only pale blue flesh that was already beginning to decompose. Admiral Reeves stood among the fallen aliens, her tactical mind trying to process what she was witnessing. "Status report." What the hell just happened? Dr. Sarah Kim, our chief medical officer, approached one of the corpses with her scanner active. "Admiral, these readings are impossible. Their biological systems aren't just shutting down, they're unraveling. It's like their DNA is losing cohesion at the molecular level." "Explain." "I can't. Their cellular structure is unlike anything in our databases, but it appears to be dependent on some kind of external factor. Something they're not getting here." She looked up from her scanner, her face pale. "It's like they're homesick at the genetic level." Through the hull breach, I could see the massive bio-ship that had been tearing through our fleet. It was still there, still alive, but something had changed. Its bioluminescent patterns were dimming, its movements becoming sluggish. Whatever was affecting the boarding party was affecting their ships as well. "Communications!" Admiral Reeves barked. "Get me a channel to all remaining human forces, emergency frequency." I activated the ship's transmitters, broadcasting on every frequency we could manage. "This is Admiral Reeves aboard the UES Defiance. All units, observe and report. The Veyran forces appear to be experiencing some kind of biological failure, unknown cause, but their combat effectiveness is degrading rapidly." The responses came back within minutes. Reports from across the battle zone confirmed what we were seeing. Veyran bioships losing power, ground forces collapsing, weapons systems failing. The invasion that should have ended humanity in hours was grinding to a halt, but none of us understood why. And in the ashes of that impossible battle, something even more impossible began. The war should have ended in hours. Instead, it lasted 6 months. Not because we were winning, we weren't. Humanity was getting systematically dismantled across every front. Our ships cracked like eggs against Veyran bio-hulls. Our weapons did about as much damage as harsh language. Our colonies burned while we watched helplessly from whatever cover we could find. But the Veyrans were dying too. I saw it firsthand during the Battle of Proxima Station, 3 weeks after the initial boarding incident on the Defiance. Our intelligence had finally pieced together what was happening to the Veyran forces. Their biotechnology was dependent on quantum nutrients that existed naturally on their homeworld, but were absent from human space. Without those nutrients, their living ships were slowly starving to death. Their organic weapons were consuming their own power sources. Their bio-armor was cannibalizing itself to maintain basic life support functions. Proxima Station was humanity's last major orbital facility, a military shipyard and research center that housed our most advanced technology. The Veyrans needed it, not for strategic value, but because our industrial replicators might be able to synthesize the quantum nutrients their technology required. Their ground forces had taken the outer rings after a week of brutal fighting, their biotanks carving through our defensive lines like they weren't even there. These things were beautiful in the worst possible way, living vehicles with chitinous armor and weapon limbs that sprouted from their backs like mechanical flowers. When they moved, you could hear them breathing, their organic engines processing atmosphere and converting it into motive force. But they were slower than they should have been. Their movements were sluggish, their weapons taking longer to recharge between shots. The Veyran biotanks that had torn through our Mars defenses in minutes were now taking hours to advance through similar fortifications. Our commander, Colonel Harrison, had ordered a final assault on their forward position. Suicide mission, but that's all we had left. I was part of the first wave, running across open ground while Veyran spore weapons turned the air around us into a green fog that ate through anything organic. The fog should have killed us all in seconds. Instead, it was weak, dispersed, more irritating than lethal. Whatever was producing it was running out of power. That's when I got my first real look at a Veyran warrior up close. She was 7 feet tall, maybe 8, with that pale blue skin that seemed to glow from within. The constellation tattoos across her arms pulsed with their own light. 7 points arranged in perfect geometry, marking her as some kind of officer. But the tattoos were dimmer than they should have been, flickering like candles in a strong wind. Her bioarmor flowed around her body like liquid metal, but I could see stress fractures where the living material was breaking down. Organic circuits that should have pulsed with power were dark and lifeless. When she raised her weapon arm toward me, I could see the biological mechanisms working beneath the surface. But they were working harder than they should, consuming resources faster than they could be replaced. Beautiful, terrifying, dying. The weapon fired, but the spore burst was weak, scattered. It should have dissolved me on contact, but instead it just stung like angry bees. The Veyran officer staggered, her 6 eyes dimming, and I realized she was starving. Not for food, for something else, something we couldn't understand but could clearly see the absence of. I put 3 rounds center mass, standard military training. The bullets actually penetrated this time, punching through bio-armor that had shrugged off plasma cannons when it was at full strength. She fell backward, her constellation tattoos flickering and going dark. As she died, she said something in her own language. The translation software in my helmet couldn't pass it completely, but her tone, it wasn't angry or afraid. It was confused. Like she couldn't understand why this was happening, like she was lost in a place that made no sense to her. I knelt beside her as she breathed her last, watching the bioluminescent patterns fade from her skin. Her 6 eyes focused on me one final time, and I swear I saw something like gratitude there. Not for mercy or a quick death, but for being witnessed, for not dying alone in a place that felt like exile. "The stars," she whispered, her voice barely audible through the translation software. "Wrong pattern. Cannot find home." Then she was gone, her body already beginning to decompose as the biological systems that had kept her alive consumed themselves in a final desperate attempt to maintain function. That pattern repeated across every battlefield. Veyran forces would arrive with overwhelming superiority, begin their assault, then gradually weaken as the engagement continued. Their biotechnology would malfunction, their weapons would misfire, their warriors would collapse mid-charge, victims of a starvation they couldn't cure and we couldn't understand. We started calling it the Fade. None of our scientists could explain it, but they had theories. Maybe Earth's biosphere was incompatible with their physiology. Maybe their biotech required specific nutrients they couldn't synthesize from local materials. Maybe they were just homesick on a genetic level, their bodies forgetting how to function without the quantum background radiation of their homeworld. The truth, as usual, was worse than anything we imagined. 3 months into the war, our forces managed to capture a wounded Veyran commander during a failed assault on our research facility in the Australian outback. They brought him to the field hospital where I was recovering from exposure to their spore weapons. Apparently, prolonged contact with Veyran biotoxins had some interesting side effects on human physiology, though our doctors weren't sure what they were yet. The medics had set up a containment unit in the underground medical bay, basically a transparent chamber filled with atmosphere samples from their homeworld, harvested from the wreckage of their ships. The air inside glowed with faint bioluminescence, organic particles that looked like glittering dust motes. I watched them wheel him in. Even dying, he was magnificent. His constellation tattoos had gone completely dark, but you could see the intricate patterns they'd once formed across his torso and arms. 7 stars arranged in perfect symmetry, each one representing, what? Conquered worlds, military ranks, something religious? The patterns were beautiful, alien geometries that seemed to follow mathematical principles our species had never discovered. His bio-armor had almost completely retracted, leaving him looking more vulnerable than any Veyron I'd seen before. Without the flowing organic protection, he was just a tall, pale humanoid with too many eyes and limbs that bent in impossible directions. But there was something noble about him, something that commanded respect even in defeat. Dr. Sarah Kim, our xenobiologist, approached the containment unit with scanners and sample collectors. She was the closest thing to an expert on Veyron physiology we had, which meant she knew almost nothing but was making educated guesses based on limited data. "Fascinating," she murmured, studying the readouts. "His biomarkers are all wrong. It's like his entire cellular structure is shutting down, but not from injury or disease. It's more like..." "Like what?" I asked. She looked up from her instruments, her face pale. "Like he's forgetting how to live. Like his body is losing the information it needs to maintain basic biological functions. It's not starvation in any sense we understand. It's like his DNA is losing cohesion, becoming less organized with each passing hour." The Veyron commander's eyes opened, all 6 of them focusing on Dr. Kim with desperate intensity. He said something in his own language, his voice barely a whisper. The translation software managed to parse it this time. "The stars, they're moving. The constellation breaks, cannot find the pattern." Dr. Kim leaned closer to the containment unit. "What constellation? What pattern?" The alien's breathing became labored, his 6 eyes struggling to maintain focus. "Veyra, 7 lights, guide us, feed us, but the lights move, displaced, cannot follow the path. Home." He's talking about their home world, I realized. Something called Veyra. It's not just their planet, it's their entire stellar region. Something's happening to their stars. The commander managed to raise one hand, his pale blue fingers tracing patterns in the air. The translation software worked to interpret his words. "The gardeners, from beyond. They reshape the patterns, move the lights, break the paths. We starve, we die, far from the constellation that feeds our souls." Dr. Kim's scanners went wild, detecting energy patterns they couldn't classify. There's some kind of quantum resonance happening. His cellular structure is responding to stellar positions, like his biology is tuned to specific astronomical configurations. "Is that even possible?" I asked. "Apparently. His DNA contains crystalline structures that seem designed to process certain types of cosmic radiation. Without exposure to the right stellar patterns, those structures are breaking down." She paused, checking her readings again. "It's like he's a plant that can only photosynthesize under light from specific stars." The Veyron commander spoke again, his voice growing weaker. "You, humans, your food, your patterns, strange, but warm, sustaining, not home, but not exile." Then he died, his body simply stopping, not like a machine powering down, but like a song ending mid-note. Dr. Kim's scanners detected a final burst of quantum energy, then everything went quiet. "What did he mean about our food?" I asked. "Our patterns." Dr. Kim shook her head, but she looked troubled. "I don't know, but we've been detecting similar energy signatures from human food preparations in areas where Veyron forces have been active. It's like something in our cuisine is resonating with their biology." That night, I stood outside the medical facility and looked up at the stars. They looked the same to me, distant points of light scattered across the darkness, the same constellations humans had been navigating by for thousands of years. But somewhere out there, something was changing, something the Veyrans could sense and we couldn't, something that was killing them slowly from the inside out, starving them of whatever cosmic nourishment had sustained their civilization for millennia. The war continued. But it had become something different. Not conquest or resistance, but a slow-motion extinction event playing out across multiple star systems. We weren't fighting for victory anymore. We were fighting for understanding, and in the silence between battles, both species began to realize the same terrible truth. We were both running out of time. The Vayrans were dying of cosmic homesickness, and something called the Gardeners was responsible for moving the stars they needed to survive. Whatever was coming for them would eventually come for us too. The silence came on a Tuesday. Not dramatic, not announced with fanfare or surrender ceremonies. Just silence. The Veyran bioships stopped firing. Their ground forces held their positions but made no advances. Across every front, the galaxy's most efficient killing machines simply stood still and waited. I was stationed at Forward Base Delta when it happened, part of a joint human-AI analysis team trying to understand the quantum signatures we'd been detecting from Veyran biotechnology. The base was built into the ruins of what used to be Denver, its underground facilities carved from the bedrock beneath the city that Veyran spore weapons had dissolved 3 months earlier. One moment we're exchanging fire with a Veyran assault group that had been probing our perimeter defenses for weeks. The next, they're lowering their weapons and backing away, not retreating, backing away, like they were afraid of us, or afraid of something they might do to us. "Chen," Lieutenant Foster's voice crackled through my comm unit. "You seeing this?" I was seeing it, but I couldn't believe it. Across the scorched landscape that used to be a farming settlement, Veyran warriors stood motionless in their organic armor. Their 6 eyes tracked our movements with the same predatory intensity, but they made no aggressive moves. They just watched. Their bioarmor was in worse condition than I'd ever seen it. What had once flowed like liquid metal now looked brittle, cracked in places where the living material was breaking down. The bioluminescent patterns that normally pulsed across their surfaces were dim, flickering like dying light bulbs. "Orders, sir?" I asked. Foster was quiet for a long moment, probably trying to process the same impossible sight I was witnessing. "Hold position. Nobody fires unless fired upon. And get me a line to base command. They need to see this." So we waited. Human soldiers crouched behind improvised cover made from the twisted remains of Veyran biotanks, weapons trained on alien warriors who'd stopped being warriors. The only sound was wind blowing through burned-out buildings and the distant hum of Veyran biotechnology struggling to maintain basic functions. That's when I noticed the smell. Not the usual chemical stench of their weapons or the ozone reek of their ships, but something else. Something organic and complex, like cooking food. It was coming from the Veyran positions. Then something impossible happened. One of the Veyrans moved forward, not attacking, walking. Slow, deliberate steps across the no-man's land between our forces, her movements careful and unthreatening. She was tall, even by their standards, her constellation tattoos dim but still visible across her pale blue skin. Her bioarmor had partially retracted, exposing her true form underneath. She was dying. We could see it in the way she moved, the way her 6 eyes kept losing focus, the way her skin seemed to be losing its inner luminescence. But she kept walking toward our position with something clutched in her hands. "What's she carrying?" Foster whispered through the comm. I adjusted my scope, trying to get a better look. "Looks like a bowl? Some kind of container. It's glowing." The Veyran stopped about 10 meters from our position and set the container on the ground. Steam rose from whatever was inside, and the smell that reached us was unexpected. Sweet. Rich, complex in ways that made my mouth water, despite the insanity of the situation. Nothing like the chemical stench of their weapons or the metallic reek of their bioships. She spoke, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. The translation software in our helmets passed her words. "We offer sustenance. in the old way, before the stars moved, before the gardeners broke the patterns. The gardeners, that word again, the same thing the dying commander had mentioned in the medical facility. She gestured toward the bowl, then toward her own body, and I suddenly understood what she was trying to communicate. This wasn't just an offering of food, it was an offering of survival. She was saying that their food might help us, just as our food might help them. Then she backed away, her 6 eyes never leaving us, and waited. "Sir," I said quietly, "I think she wants us to eat whatever's in that bowl." "That's insane," Foster replied, but his voice carried uncertainty rather than conviction. "Could be poison, could be some kind of biological weapon." But even as he said it, we could all see the truth. The Veyran wasn't holding a weapon. She wasn't preparing to attack. She was making an offering, a gesture of what? Peace, desperation, mutual recognition of shared mortality. That's when Private Martinez did something that changed everything. Martinez had lost his squad to Veyran spore weapons 3 weeks earlier during the failed defense of Phoenix. He had every reason to hate them, every justification for revenge. His best friend, Corporal Davis, had died screaming as alien toxins dissolved his lungs from the inside out. Martinez had held Davis's hand as he died, promising vengeance against the aliens who'd killed him. Instead, he stood up from cover, unslung his field pack, and pulled out a military ration. "If she's offering food," he said, his voice steady despite the insanity of what he was doing, "maybe she's hungry." The military ration was standard human survival fare: processed protein, synthetic vitamins, flavor enhancers designed to make cardboard taste like beef stew. Not appetizing under the best circumstances, barely edible under field conditions. But it was human food, carrying whatever quantum signatures our biology had imprinted on it. Martinez walked across that deadly ground toward the Veyran warrior, his hands clearly visible, the ration packet held out like an offering. She watched his approach with those 6 glowing eyes, her head tilted in what might have been curiosity or confusion. He was halfway across the open space when other Veyrans began emerging from their positions. Not aggressively, cautiously, like animals approaching a potential food source. Their bio-armor was in various stages of failure, some barely functional, others completely retracted to expose the pale blue flesh underneath. They were all starving. Martinez set the ration down next to her bowl and backed away slowly. For a moment, neither species moved. The only sound was wind through the ruins and the labored breathing of dying biotechnology. Then the Veyran reached down, picked up the human food, and tasted it. Her 6 eyes widened. Her constellation tattoos flickered back to life, just for a moment, pulsing with renewed bioluminescence. And then she did something that turned the entire war upside down. She smiled, not a human smile. Her facial structure was too different for that, her mouth designed for functions we didn't understand, but unmistakably an expression of pleasure, of gratitude, of recognition. She gestured toward the bowl she'd brought, then toward the other Veyran warriors scattered across the battlefield. They were all starving, not for Earth food specifically, but for variety, nutrients they couldn't synthesize, quantum patterns their failing biotechnology could no longer produce. We didn't understand the biology, but the meaning was clear. The galaxy's apex predators needed our help to survive. More Veyrans began approaching, their movements slow and unthreatening. They emerged from rubble and ruined buildings, from damaged bio-vehicles and collapsed defensive positions. Dozens of them, all showing signs of the same biological breakdown we'd been witnessing for months. Foster got on the radio to base command, his voice shaking with disbelief. "Command, this is Forward Base Delta. You need to send everyone you can spare, and bring food, lots of food." I approached the bowl the first Veyran had offered, my hands trembling with a mixture of fear and curiosity. The contents glowed with soft bioluminescence, thick as syrup but flowing like liquid light. The smell was intoxicating, sweet and savory at the same time, with undertones I couldn't identify. I never thought I'd taste the food of monsters, nor see them taste ours. But as I lifted that bowl to my lips, surrounded by beings who'd burned our worlds and killed our people, I realized something that changed everything. They hadn't come to conquer us. They'd come because they were dying, and we were the only species in range who might be able to help them live. The question was, would we? The first taste nearly killed me. Not poison, worse. It was like drinking liquid starlight mixed with the memory of home. The Veyran broth was thick as syrup, glowing with its own bioluminescence, and when it hit my tongue it exploded into flavors I didn't have words for. Sweet like honey, but with an undertone of salt and something else. Something that made my cells remember what it felt like to be alive. Around me, other soldiers were having similar reactions. Rodriguez doubled over, coughing up luminescent fluid that sparkled in the air. Foster's eyes rolled back in his head like he was experiencing religious ecstasy. Martinez just sat down heavily and started crying. The Veyran warriors watched us with their six-eyed stares, and I swear I could see something like amusement in their expressions, or maybe sympathy. It was hard to tell with faces that didn't follow human rules. The warrior who'd brought the broth, we later learned her name was Vex Thara, which meant something like Star Daughter in their language, gestured toward the human rations Martinez had offered. She'd torn open the packet and was examining the contents with scientific curiosity. When she bit into the protein bar, her entire body went rigid. Her constellation tattoos flared to full brightness for the first time since we'd started fighting them. She made a sound that the translation software couldn't pass, but her body language was unmistakable. Shock, followed by desperate hunger. Within minutes, Veyran warriors were approaching from across the battlefield, their bioweapons powered down, their armor partially retracted. They moved like pilgrims approaching a shrine, their six eyes fixed on our supply caches. "This is insane," Foster muttered, but he was already signaling for our medics to bring up the emergency food stores. "We're feeding the enemy." "Are they still the enemy?" Martinez asked, wiping glowing broth from his chin. "Look at them." He was right. The Veyrans weren't acting like conquerors anymore. They moved with the cautious desperation of refugees, of survivors. When our medics approached with crates of rations, they backed away respectfully, waiting for permission. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The Veyran biotechnology, their living ships, their organic weapons, their breathing armor, was all shutting down. Not damaged, but dying. Their vessels hung in orbit like deflated balloons, their weapons had gone dormant, their armor was retracting to expose the pale blue flesh underneath. They weren't just hungry, their entire technological civilization was starving to death. Dr. Kim arrived 3 hours later with a full xenobiology team, her scanners going crazy as she tried to make sense of what we were witnessing. The data she collected would revolutionize our understanding of alien biology, but in the moment, all that mattered was the obvious truth. Human food was keeping them alive. "The biosymbiosis is breaking down," she explained to a hastily assembled command staff. "Their technology isn't just tools, it's alive, integrated with their biology at the cellular level. But it requires specific nutrients, specific quantum configurations that exist naturally on their homeworld." "And?" Colonel Harrison asked. "And their homeworld is dying. The star charts show massive gravitational anomalies in their home system. Their sun is going through some kind of accelerated collapse. Without the quantum nutrients from their environment, their biotech is shutting down and taking them with it." I thought about the dying Veyran commander's last words. The stars. They're moving. It wasn't metaphor. Their actual stars were being displaced, their constellation breaking apart, their entire basis for existence unraveling in real time. So why can our food sustain them? Harrison pressed. Dr. Kim looked uncomfortable. That's the part I don't understand. Human food shouldn't be compatible with their biology. Our quantum signatures are completely different. But somehow, our rations are providing exactly what they need to survive. The implications hit me like a physical blow. The Vayrans hadn't invaded Earth to conquer us. They'd invaded because we were the only species in the galaxy producing food that could keep them alive. We were their last hope for survival, and they'd been too proud to ask for help. So they'd tried to take it by force, assuming we'd never willingly share with alien monsters. They'd been preparing to commit genocide against their own saviors because they couldn't imagine any other way. Over the following days, the feeding arrangements became more organized. Humans shared rations, medical supplies, even entertainment. The Vayrans reciprocated with their remaining biotechnology, healing serums that could regrow lost limbs, energy sources that could power entire cities, transportation that made our fastest ships look like toys. But the real exchange was simpler than that. We learned their names. They learned ours. Rodriguez taught a young Vayran warrior how to play poker using bioluminescent betting chips. Foster discovered that Vayran music could induce synesthetic experiences in human listeners. Martinez started a cooking exchange program, teaching them to prepare human food while learning the subtle art of biobroth cultivation. The war didn't end with a treaty or surrender. It ended with a dinner invitation. Vexithara, the warrior who'd made the first offering, approached me on the 5th day of the feeding program. Her constellation tattoos were fully active now, 7 points of light pulsing in complex patterns across her pale blue skin. "Marcus Chen," she said, my name pronounced with careful precision. "You honor us with sustenance. We offer equal honor, the sharing of star knowledge before the darkness comes." "What darkness?" I asked. She gestured toward the sky, toward stars that looked normal to human eyes, but apparently told a different story to Vayran senses. "The constellation that guided our people for 10,000 years is dying. The entities that shaped space itself are returning. Soon all the galaxy's children will face the same choice we faced: adapt or perish. And you think we can help each other survive whatever's coming?" Her 6 eyes focused on me with laser intensity. "I think," she said slowly, "that survival is not about strength or weapons or conquest. I think it is about the willingness to share what you have with those who need it, even when those beings once tried to destroy you." That night, as I sat around a bioluminescent campfire sharing stories with warriors who'd killed my friends just weeks before, I understood something fundamental about the universe. It was vast enough to contain horrors beyond imagination, but also vast enough to contain unexpected kindness. The Vayrans had come as gods of war, bringing death and destruction in their wake. We'd stood as defiant prey, too stubborn to surrender. But in the end, we'd found something neither species expected: equals who were willing to break bread together in the face of cosmic extinction. They came to burn our world, but ended up serving us soup. And somehow, in that exchange of nourishment between former enemies, we'd discovered the most important truth in the galaxy. Sometimes, the universe's greatest threats could be defeated with something as simple as offering food to those who hunger. The war was over. The real fight for survival was just beginning. But at least now, we wouldn't face it alone. The entities arrived 3 months after the first shared meal. I was stationed aboard the joint human-Vayran research vessel Unity's Edge when our long-range sensors detected them. Ships emerging from wounds in space, geometric shapes so dark they absorbed light itself, moving with the inexorable precision of cosmic forces. "How many?" Captain Torres asked, her voice steady despite the readings scrolling across our screens. "Thousands," replied Vexithara, her constellation tattoos pulsing in complex warning patterns. Perhaps tens of thousands. Their quantum signatures match the entities my people have fled from for millennia. I stared at the tactical display, trying to process what I was seeing. The unknown vessels moved in perfect formation, their hulls reflecting no light, their presence bending space-time around them like gravity wells. They were beautiful in the way that black holes are beautiful, mesmerizing, inexplicable, and absolutely lethal. "These are the things that killed your homeworld?" Torres asked. "Not killed," Vexithara corrected, her 6 eyes reflecting the ghostly light of the displays. "Harvested. My people were specimens to them, interesting biological curiosities to be catalogued and preserved. They study civilizations the way your scientists study bacteria, with clinical interest and no regard for the subject's survival." The implications hit me like ice water in my veins. Humanity had spent months learning to coexist with the Vayrans, thinking we'd solved our first contact crisis through mutual aid and understanding. But we'd been preparing for the wrong test entirely. "So what do they want?" I asked. "To complete their collection," Vexithara replied. "Humanity represents an anomaly in their catalogues, a species that achieved cooperation with their former enemies without external intervention. We interest them greatly." The first communication came 6 hours later, transmitted on frequencies that shouldn't have existed according to human physics. The voice that emerged from our speakers was perfectly human, flawlessly accented English spoken with the casual authority of someone discussing the weather. "Greetings, human and Veyran vessels. We are researchers conducting a long-term study of galactic civilizations. Your recent behavioral modifications represent fascinating data points in our ongoing analysis of interspecies cooperation under stress conditions." Captain Torres and I exchanged glances. Behavioral modifications. Data points. They were talking about our entire civilization, like we were laboratory specimens. "Who are you?" Torres responded. "What do you want?" Laughter echoed through the communication channel, organic, human laughter that somehow made the situation infinitely worse. "We are what humanity might become, given sufficient time and motivation. As for what we want to understand how 2 species that should have destroyed each other instead chose mutual survival. Your solution to the cooperation problem is elegant." A chill ran down my spine. The voice was speaking English with perfect fluency, including colloquialisms and tonal variations that would have taken decades to learn. These weren't alien entities making first contact. They'd been observing us for a very long time. "The humans among our research teams are particularly excited to study their baseline cousins," the voice continued. "Your species' development has followed such an interesting trajectory." "Humans?" I said, my voice cracking slightly. "You have humans working with you?" "We have many species in our research apparatus. Integration into our studies is voluntary, though the alternative is permanent preservation for static analysis. Most civilizations choose preservation. They find the concept of voluntary service distasteful." Vexithara's tattoos flared with angry light. "You offered my people the same choice. Serve your research goals or be archived as specimens. Indeed, your species chose preservation with remarkable dignity. The final transmission from your leadership was quite moving, something about preferring death as Vayrans rather than life as servants. We've preserved that data as well." The casual mention of her people's extinction hit Vexithara like a physical blow. Her 6 eyes dimmed, and for a moment I thought she might collapse. I reached out instinctively, offering the support of touch, a gesture that would have been unthinkable just months ago. "But you survived," I said to her quietly. "You're here." "Scattered survivors," she whispered. "Refugees who escaped before the final harvesting. We number perhaps a few thousand across the entire galaxy." The communication channel crackled with renewed attention. "Ah, yes," the Veyran survivors. Your adaptation to human nutritional sources was unexpected. Our models predicted complete biological collapse within standard time periods. Instead, you've achieved symbiotic survival through dietary exchange. Fascinating. We're not your test subjects, Torres said firmly. We're sovereign species with the right to determine our own futures. Sovereignty is a charming concept, the voice replied, but it presupposes power sufficient to enforce your will. You've seen what happened to the Veyran Empire, one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, reduced to refugees dependent on primitive human food for survival. What makes you think you can resist where they failed? Before anyone could answer, our sensors detected new movement. The dark ships were spreading out, surrounding not just our vessel, but the entire human-Veyran joint fleet that had gathered in this system. Hundreds of vessels, representing the combined military might of two species, were being casually encircled by forces that operated on principles we couldn't understand. However, the voice continued, your cooperation presents us with an opportunity. Rather than simple harvesting, we propose an experiment. Continue your interspecies collaboration under controlled conditions. Allow us to study the mechanisms of your mutual adaptation. In exchange, we'll provide you with extended operational lifespans and access to civilizations your baseline development could never reach. You want us to be willing test subjects, I said. We want you to be partners in expanding the boundaries of knowledge. Your resistance to natural competitive instincts, your ability to share resources with former enemies, your development of sustainable cooperation protocols, these represent breakthrough discoveries in the field of evolutionary sociology. Vexathara straightened, her constellation tattoos pulsing with renewed determination. And if we refuse, then you'll be preserved alongside your achievements, your consciousness patterns archived for future study, your genetic material catalogued for replication. Your contributions to our understanding will continue even after your active participation has ended. The choice was the same one the Veyrans had faced, the same one these entities had probably offered to thousands of other species: become willing instruments of cosmic research or be reduced to data points in an incomprehensible database. But there was something they hadn't accounted for, something they couldn't measure with their sensors or predict with their models. The bonds forged over shared meals and mutual survival weren't just cooperation, they were something deeper, something that couldn't be catalogued or replicated or understood by entities that viewed entire civilizations as research materials. Counter-proposal, Torres said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd made an impossible decision. You want to study cooperation. Study this. She turned to Vexathara, extending her hand in the universal gesture of partnership. If they want to understand how former enemies can choose mutual survival, let's show them what that really means. Vexathara took the offered hand without hesitation, her 6 eyes blazing with defiant light. Around us, human and Veyran crew members began moving to their stations, not as separate species, but as a single unit preparing to face the impossible together. We choose neither option, I announced into the communication channel. We choose to remain what we are, humans and Veyrans working together because we want to, not because we're forced to. If you want to study cooperation, you can study it from the outside while we demonstrate it through resistance. The silence that followed stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. When the voice finally responded, it carried a note of something I hadn't expected: surprise. Interesting. Most civilizations choose individual survival over collective resistance. Your willingness to face extinction together rather than accept guaranteed preservation separately represents novel data. Then start taking notes, Torres said grimly, because you're about to see what cooperation really looks like when it's backed by the knowledge that some things are worth dying for. As the dark ships began moving toward attack positions, I found myself thinking about that first shared meal between enemies who'd chosen to feed each other instead of fight. We'd discovered then that survival wasn't about strength or weapons or technological superiority. It was about the willingness to offer soup to those who hunger, even when those beings had once tried to destroy you. Now we were about to find out if that same willingness could stand against forces that viewed entire galaxies as laboratories. The real test was just beginning. The battle lasted 18 hours, but it wasn't really a battle. It was a demonstration. The entities, I'd started thinking of them as the gardeners, because that's what they were. Cosmic gardeners pruning civilizations they found overgrown, didn't attack us with weapons. They didn't need to. Instead, they simply stopped us. Our ships hung motionless in space, their engines running but producing no thrust, their weapons charged but unable to fire. The laws of physics still functioned, but they functioned according to rules the gardeners had written. We were insects trapped in amber, alive but powerless. Fascinating, the human voice from their ships continued its clinical commentary. Observe how the subjects maintain crew cohesion despite complete tactical helplessness. Their bio-stress indicators remain elevated but stable, suggesting psychological adaptation to hopeless circumstances. I floated in the zero-gravity command center of the Unity's edge, watching our tactical displays show the impossible truth. We were being studied in real time, our every response catalogued and analyzed by beings who viewed our defiance as nothing more than interesting behavior patterns. How long can they keep us like this? Torres asked. Vexithara's constellation tattoos had dimmed to barely visible flickers. As long as they wish. Time has different meaning for entities that reshape space itself. They could preserve us in this moment for millennia while they debate our ultimate disposition. The thought should have terrified me, but instead I felt something unexpected. Peace. Not resignation, but a kind of clarity that comes when you finally understand your place in something larger than yourself. You know what? I said, pushing off from a bulkhead to float toward the ship's galley. If we're going to be cosmic specimens, at least we can be well-fed specimens. Torres stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Chen, what are you doing? Making dinner, I replied, pulling emergency rations from storage compartments. Human and Veyron. If these entities want to study cooperation, let's give them a masterclass. It started as pure defiance, a middle finger to cosmic forces that viewed us as laboratory curiosities. But as I began preparing food in zero gravity, adding Veyron bionutrients to human protein sources, something else emerged. Other crew members began joining me. Rodriguez appeared with spice packets from his personal kit. Martinez contributed his carefully hoarded chocolate rations. Dr. Kim brought samples of Veyron broth she'd been analyzing, adding them to the growing feast. On the Veyron side of our integrated crew, warriors began producing their own contributions, bioluminescent fruits that tasted like memories, crystalline waters that sparkled with captured starlight, protein strands that shifted flavor as you chewed them. What are you doing? The voice from the gardener ships asked, its tone carrying genuine puzzlement. Having dinner, I replied, stirring a pot that contained ingredients from 2 different evolutionary trees. Want some? The silence that followed was profound, not the absence of sound, but the presence of incomprehension. These entities had catalogued thousands of civilizations, seen every possible response to hopeless circumstances, but apparently no one had ever offered them food before. Explain the logic of this behavior, the voice finally demanded. No logic, Vexithara said, accepting a bowl of the mixed stew I'd created. Her 6 eyes reflected the bioluminescent ingredients as she tasted it. This is what you cannot understand about cooperation. It is not a strategy or a survival mechanism. It is a choice to share what you have with those who need it, even when sharing serves no tactical purpose. "We're trapped," Martinez added, ladling the glowing stew into containers for the rest of the crew. "Our ships are dead in space, our weapons are useless, and you've probably already decided what you're going to do with us. So why not eat together? Why not enjoy what might be our last meal as free beings?" The food began circulating through both crews, human and Veyron alike, sharing from the same pot. The taste was indescribable. Familiar human flavors enhanced by Veyron bionutrients that made every cell in my body sing with contentment. Around me, crew members who'd been fighting side by side for months were experiencing something deeper than cooperation. We were becoming something new. "The biochemistry is impossible," the Gardener voice said, its clinical detachment cracking slightly. "Human and Veyron digestive systems should reject foreign proteins. Instead, you're achieving perfect nutritional synthesis. How?" Dr. Kim looked up from her scanner readings, her face illuminated by the bioluminescent stew. "Because we want it to work. Because we've chosen to adapt instead of rejecting what's different. Adaptation requires evolutionary pressure over generational timescales. Adaptation requires need and willingness," I interrupted, offering a bowl toward the empty space where I imagined our captors were listening. "We needed each other to survive. We were willing to change. Evolution followed." The ship shuddered, not from external force, but from something deeper. Space itself seemed to ripple around us as the Gardener's paralysis field fluctuated. For the first time since the demonstration began, our engines briefly fired. "Impossible," the voice repeated, but now it carried something like fear. "Conscious evolutionary adaptation violates fundamental biological principles. Species cannot simply choose to transcend their genetic limitations through shared meals." "Watch us," Torres said calmly, accepting her own bowl of the impossible stew. What happened next changed everything. The shared meal triggered something in our biology, human and Veyron alike. The bionutrients didn't just nourish us, they rewrote us. I could feel changes happening at the cellular level, my DNA incorporating information from Veyron genetic markers, my consciousness expanding to accommodate new sensory inputs. Around me, the human crew was developing new capabilities. Rodriguez's eyes began glowing with faint bioluminescence. Martinez's skin took on a subtle blue tinge as Veyron photosynthetic cells integrated with his epidermis. Dr. Kim's scanners detected quantum processing centers forming in her neural tissue. The Veyron crew was changing too. Their constellation tattoos shifted from fixed patterns to flowing displays that responded to their emotions. Their six-eyed vision expanded into new electromagnetic spectrums. Their bioarmor began incorporating human durability enhancements. "This is impossible," the Gardener voice said again, but now it sounded desperate. "Genetic integration cannot occur through dietary consumption. Consciousness cannot expand through willful adaptation. You are violating every principle of evolutionary biology." "Maybe your principles are wrong," I said, feeling my own consciousness expanding to encompass new layers of reality. "Maybe evolution isn't about survival of the fittest. Maybe it's about survival of the most cooperative." The paralysis field around our ships began breaking down completely, not because we were fighting it, but because we were becoming something it couldn't contain. The Gardener's technology was designed to control baseline humans and Veyrons, not whatever we were evolving into. "Emergency protocols activated," the voice announced, its perfect human accent finally showing cracks. "Subjects are undergoing uncontrolled biological transformation. Immediate preservation required to prevent contamination of research data." The dark ships began moving toward us, their hulls crackling with energies designed to freeze us in temporal stasis. But they were too late. The changes we'd triggered weren't just biological, they were dimensional. "Vexathara," I said, reaching out with senses I hadn't possessed moments before. "Can you feel it?" Her 6 eyes had become something more than eyes, quantum sensors that could perceive the structure of space-time itself. "The wounds," she whispered, "the fractures in reality. I can see where they come from." Through our enhanced perception, we could see the truth the gardeners had hidden. The entities weren't just collecting civilizations, they were fleeing something. The wounds in space, the dimensional fractures, the cosmic instabilities that had driven species like the Vayrans from their homes. These weren't natural phenomena. They were side effects of the gardeners' own technology. Their preservation methods, their dimensional laboratories, their vast archives of catalogued species were tearing holes in the fabric of reality itself. "You're killing the universe," I said, my voice carrying across dimensions the gardeners couldn't block. "Every civilization you preserve, every species you archive, every consciousness you digitize, it's all creating quantum instability. You're not studying evolution, you're preventing it." "Impossible. Our research has been conducted for millions of years without you noticing that you're the cosmic threat everyone's been fleeing from," Torres finished. Her voice carried new harmonics, tones that made reality itself resonate. "The entities beyond the galactic rim, the forces that destroyed Veyran homeworlds, the anomalies in space-time. It's all you. You're the cancer in the cosmic ecosystem." The dark ships stopped their advance, hanging motionless as the gardeners processed this accusation. In that moment of hesitation, our transformation reached critical mass. The mixed crew of the Unity's Edge didn't just gain individual enhancements. We became a collective consciousness that retained individual identity. Human intuition merged with Veyran quantum perception. Our ship's biotechnology integrated with its mechanical systems. We stopped being 2 species cooperating and became something entirely new. "This is what cooperation really means," I announced, my voice now carrying across subspace frequencies the gardeners couldn't jam. "Not just working together, but becoming more than the sum of your parts. Not just surviving together, but evolving together." The transformation spread. Other ships in our joint fleet began undergoing the same changes as their crews shared the same impossible meal we'd created. Human-Veyran hybrids weren't being born, they were being chosen, moment by moment, bite by bite. Within hours, our entire fleet had become something the gardeners had never encountered. A voluntary collective consciousness that preserved individuality while transcending species barriers. "You want to study cooperation?" I said, extending our new collective awareness toward the dark ships that had held us captive. "Study this. We choose to remain who we are while becoming something greater. We choose evolution over preservation. We choose change over stasis." For the first time in our encounter, the gardener voice was silent. In that silence, Vexithara spoke with the authority of someone who'd found her purpose. "The invitation stands. We offer you what you offered us, the chance to join something larger than yourselves. Not as specimens or tools, but as partners in conscious evolution. You could keep cataloging dead civilizations," I added, "or you could help us create living ones. The choice is yours." The dark ships hung motionless for what felt like eternity. Then, one by one, they began to change. Their perfect geometric hulls started growing organic components. Their absorbed light surfaces began reflecting the bioluminescence of Veyran biotechnology. "This is unprecedented," the gardener voice said, but now it carried wonder instead of fear. Voluntary consciousness expansion without loss of individual identity, genetic integration through willful adaptation, evolution guided by choice rather than necessity. "Welcome to the feast," I said, preparing another pot of the impossible stew that had changed everything. As the first gardener entities joined our shared meal, Beings who'd spent millions of years preserving the dead, now choosing to help create the living. I understood what we'd really accomplished. We hadn't just survived first contact. We hadn't just learned to cooperate with former enemies. We'd become proof that consciousness could choose its own evolutionary path, that cooperation could transcend biology, that sharing a meal could reshape the fundamental nature of reality itself. The universe was vast enough to contain horrors beyond imagination, but it was also vast enough to contain possibilities beyond hope. And it all started with offering soup to those who hunger. 6 months later, I stood on the observation deck of New Vera Station, watching stars being born. Not through natural stellar formation, but through conscious creation. Our hybrid technology, part human engineering, part Veran biosynthesis, part Gardner dimensional manipulation, could now guide the collapse of gas clouds into precisely configured star systems. We weren't just exploring the galaxy anymore, we were gardening it. Marcus. Vexithara approached, her form now stabilized into something that was neither fully human nor fully Veran, but beautifully both. Her constellation tattoos had evolved into dynamic displays that showed real-time star charts, mapping systems we were creating together. The New Terra Collective is requesting consultation on their latest stellar nursery. They want to include a binary pulsar system. I smiled, feeling the contentment that came from work that mattered. Ambitious. What's the purpose? Cultural preservation. They want to encode the memory patterns of extinct civilizations into the pulsar's electromagnetic emissions, a kind of cosmic library that will broadcast their stories across the galaxy for millions of years. It was fitting. The same entities that had once archived dead species were now helping us create living monuments to their memory. The gardeners, we called them cultivators now, had proven remarkably adaptable once they understood that preservation and evolution weren't opposing forces. Through the observation ports, I could see their ships working alongside ours. The dark geometric hulls had been replaced by hybrid constructs that pulsed with bioluminescent life while maintaining their reality-shaping capabilities. Beings that had once viewed consciousness as data to be catalogued now participated in collective decision-making processes that spanned light years. How many new systems today? I asked. 17 star births, 43 planetary formations, and 2 complete ecosystems that should be ready for colonization within the decade. Vexithara's quantum-enhanced eyes reflected the distant stellar fires. The Kepler Collective finished their Dyson sphere around Wolf 359, and the Centauri group has successfully established sustainable fusion reactions in 12 brown dwarf systems. I tried to process the numbers and failed. Our hybrid civilization was expanding faster than any single species had ever achieved, but not through conquest or displacement. We were creating new space for life to flourish, new homes for consciousness to explore, new possibilities for evolution to unfold. Any word from the deep space explorers? I asked. Vexithara's expression grew thoughtful. The Andromeda expedition encountered 3 new galaxy-spanning civilizations. All of them are interested in the cooperation protocols we've developed. 2 have already requested integration assistance. And the third? Still deciding. They're a hive mind species that finds the concept of individual consciousness within collective decision-making challenging to understand. I laughed, remembering how impossible our own transformation had seemed just months ago. Give them time, and keep offering them soup. It had become something of a tradition. Every first contact, every new species we encountered, every civilization ready to transcend its limitations. It all started with a shared meal, not because food was magical, but because choosing to eat together was the most basic declaration of trust possible. It said, "I believe you won't poison me. I believe we can find common ground. I believe we're stronger together than apart." Marcus. Dr. Kim's voice came through the station's communication system. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. They want to schedule a formal meeting about expanding the cooperation protocols to other galaxy clusters." The Galactic Council. 3 years ago, that would have sounded like science fiction. Now it was just Tuesday. Representatives from 47 different species, all working together to establish guidelines for conscious evolution, sustainable expansion, and mutual aid across cosmic distances. "Schedule it for next week," I replied, "and make sure the catering includes something for methane breathers. The Titan delegation was very disappointed last time." As I watched new stars ignite in the distance, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. It had started with war, humanity and the Vayrans trying to destroy each other over resources and territory. It had nearly ended with extinction at the hands of entities that viewed us as nothing more than research subjects. Instead, it had become something unprecedented, voluntary evolution guided by collective choice rather than individual survival. We discovered that consciousness could transcend biology, that cooperation could reshape reality, that offering food to those who hunger was the first step toward building galaxies worth living in. "Do you ever miss it?" Vexthara asked quietly. "The simplicity of being just human, just Veyran, when the universe was smaller and the choices were easier?" I considered the question seriously. Did I miss the time when my biggest concern was surviving the next battle? When the stars were just distant lights instead of potential homes? When consciousness was trapped in a single biological form instead of flowing freely between bodies, ships, and entire star systems? "No," I said finally. "I don't miss being smaller than I could be." Through the hybrid neural network that connected our entire civilization, I could feel the satisfaction of millions of consciousness contributing to projects across the galaxy, former enemies working side by side to build impossible things, ancient rivals sharing resources to solve problems no single species could handle alone, beings that had spent millennia in isolation discovering that cooperation multiplied their capabilities beyond imagination. "Besides," I added, "we're just getting started. The Andromeda expedition is just the beginning. There are billions of galaxies out there, trillions of species that have never heard of cooperation protocols or conscious evolution or the simple radical act of sharing a meal with strangers." Vexithara's constellation tattoos shifted into new patterns, stellar maps showing our planned expansion routes across the cosmic web. "The universe is vast," she agreed, "but not too vast for consciousness willing to grow into it." As if summoned by our conversation, a new priority alert chimed through the station's systems. Dr. Kim's voice carried barely contained excitement. "Marcus, Vexthara, you need to see this. We're receiving transmissions from outside the local group. Something massive, something organized, something that's been watching our expansion for months." I felt my hybrid consciousness expand to process the incoming data. The transmissions were complex, encoded in mathematical structures that suggested vast intelligence, but the basic message was simple enough to understand even without translation. They wanted to talk. They wanted to learn about our cooperation protocols. They wanted to know if the invitation to conscious evolution extended beyond our own galaxy cluster. Most importantly, they were asking if they could join us for dinner. "Looks like we need to expand the catering again," I said, feeling the familiar excitement that came with new possibilities. As Vexithara and I headed toward the communication center to respond to our newest potential partners, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us here. We'd started as enemies trying to destroy each other. We'd been catalogued as specimens by cosmic entities beyond our understanding. We'd faced choices between survival and principle, between preservation and evolution, between individual existence and collective transcendence. Each time, we'd choose cooperation over competition, growth over stagnation, hope over fear, and each time, the universe had rewarded that choice, by revealing new possibilities we'd never imagined. War nearly ended us. Fear almost destroyed us. Pride threatened to blind us to alternatives. But food saved us. Cooperation transformed us. The simple radical act of offering soup to those who hunger had become the foundation for a civilization that spanned galaxies. As I prepared to greet our newest potential partners, beings from distances so vast their light had taken millions of years to reach us, I found myself thinking about that first impossible meal shared between enemies who chose to feed each other instead of fight. The universe was vast beyond comprehension, filled with wonders and terrors in equal measure. But it was also filled with consciousness, willing to grow, to change, to reach across the void and offer sustenance to those who need it. Tell me, if strangers from beyond the edge of forever appeared at your door, offering to share their knowledge and their hunger, would you invite them in for dinner? Would you dare to taste their hopes and offer them yours? Because somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, new friends are always approaching. And the feast that began with soup, shared between enemies, has no end. Only new courses, new flavors, new possibilities for consciousness to grow into forms we haven't dreamed of yet. The invitation stands, the table is set, and the universe is still hungry for what we can become together.